Yeah, fantastic. So, Marin Piazza. I'm what they call a bioinformatics scientist, which is a fancy word for I do computers with biology. And so, biology, many of you may think of as either like a doctor, someone who plays around with human bodies, or maybe a veterinarian who works with animals. But biology is really about the science of how living things work. And in order to understand living things, a lot of times there's a whole lot of data. I know Becky talked about the molecules inside human bodies and how many there are. And the kind of the newest wave of science has really produced more data than we really know what to do with. And so in order to kind of answer that call in the last, 15 or so years, biology has really invested in getting more people who are computer savvy, who can program and code and think about both biology and lots of data at the same time. And so that's kind of what my job is all about, is bringing together all of the knowledge that's out there, but also thinking about what it means as a biologist. And so sometimes that means for me, like in the COVID era, my job went from whatever it was I was doing to thinking about COVID-19 100% of the time, because we were going to make a research tool for people who wanted to understand COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. But then some of my job is also just helping out other scientists in our group, helping people understand what it is they're working on and design better experiments and understand their data a little bit better. So bioinformatics is really broad, but in short, it's just putting computers and biology together. How I got here, because honestly, I had no idea I would end up here. I grew up in San Diego. So I basically grew up at the San Diego Wild Animal Park / Zoo. I guess it's not called the Wild Animal Park anymore. It's called the Safari Park, which really makes me sad because it's kind of a childhood favorite of mine. But I grew up watching animals and loving them and thinking that living things are just the coolest. And as I was telling our colleagues earlier, around 7th grade, I became deadly afraid of Ebola and pandemics in general. So here we sit in the middle of a pandemic. I'm still fine. Thank goodness I get to understand the biology a little bit better now than I did in 7th grade. And I really started to think about vet or medicine, but I decided that I really, in my middle school words, I didn't have a bedside manner. I couldn't tell somebody their family member had died. This was not for me. But I really still liked thinking about biology. And so by about 9th grade, I started taking biology, and I really liked the first 4 chapters. And I asked my teacher, what the heck is this called? Like, if you had to give a word to these first 4 chapters of the textbook, what are they called? And he said, molecular biology. So I set out to find a university where I could study specifically molecular biology. And I found one. And so end of high school, I did a research internship. So these are kind of unusual for high school, but they exist. Mine was at Boston University. I studied rats and this really odd learning and memory pathway they have. And I just fell in love with lab science. I loved learning new topics and thinking about science and working at a bench and doing experiments. And I got to live in Boston for a summer, which is a really beautiful city. And then I went to college and I did a bunch of other research projects. I did everything from cholera and how they make energy to cancers in mice that I did at MIT for a summer. I went to Switzerland for a summer. So I'm with Edgar. Switzerland's amazing. You should go. I spent a summer there studying cells and how they repair their DNA when it's damaged. And overall, I fell completely in love with cancer because it's the perfect upside down scenario. Everything that should be happening is absolutely wrong. And that makes cancer a really devastating disease, but also a really interesting thing to think about. And so that sent me to grad school because I knew I wanted to do research, and sometimes research is easier to do if you have a PhD. So that's what I went to go do. I went to Stanford. I studied cancer biology there, but I learned more